What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of We Run This. I'm Chris Illuminati. With me, as always, is Nick Domingo. Nick, what's up, buddy?
Not much, brother. How about yourself? How you doing?
I'm doing good. I hurt my back, so there's that. I have just a list of okay. So you know how
you just lie. You just openly lie. I'm good. I hurt my back.
I'm
so
good.
No, you're not.
I'm good. I can't move the lower half of my back. All right. So this is what makes me upset and mad and pissed off. Like, it's one thing to get injured. Like a couple weeks ago when you wrote about biting it on a run. Like if you hurt yourself running, it sucks, but you get it. Like if you're doing something and you get hurt, you get it. Here's how I got hurt. I'm driving in the car with my daughter. She says, "Oh, they decorated that tree over there." And instead of turning with my head, I kind of turned with my entire upper body, and this shooting pain went up the side of my back, up to my lats, up to my back. I was like, "Whoa," and I almost couldn't move. So when I dropped her off, I was dropping her off at her mom's house. I walked inside. I'm like, I need 3 Advil immediately. And so she gave me 3 Advil, but the entire ride home, I took my jacket off. I have the seat heaters. So it's I almost had a heating pad on my back.
You just drove around town.
Yeah. Well, it's a 40-minute ride. So I had a long enough time for the seat heater to work. But I felt like the oldest man in the world looking at Christmas lights and hurting my back.
It happens to the best of them, man. We've all been there. It's like you wake up one day and all of a sudden that pain that you didn't know that you had in a muscle, it's there, man. So hopefully you recover. Have you not been able to run all week because of it?
It just happened yesterday. I tried running on Tuesday, and it just okay. So on Sunday I ran 14.8 miles.
There you go.
With my running.
There you go.
Yeah. So I tried to run again on Tuesday, and I just wanted to do maybe 2 or 3 miles, and just my body was like, nah. So it wasn't letting me. And then I went to the gym a couple times. So I've kind of been I didn't do anything today just because I don't want to re-aggravate it and be stupid. But I might try and go out maybe by Sunday. I'll try and see. We're recording this on Thursday, so maybe by Sunday I'll kind of give it a what's it's doing?
Yeah, a couple days off probably won't hurt yourself, especially after doing that many miles. Earlier this week, I guess. You want to make sure you're recovered, man, because coming back from those, I know it gets antsy sometimes. You think, oh man, I haven't run all week. I need to do 5 miles, and your body just shuts down afterwards. So yeah, just pace yourself. I don't want to see my co-host, down for the count, man. Yeah, exactly.
Being a body cast next time, it's hey, I get my hands out. The thing that's been keeping me from running is it's been a steady 30 degrees all week long. So I'm kind of nah, I can pass. I'm not going to go out there. Yeah. How about you? Running?
I haven't run. I biked 35 yesterday. It's been a little bit. Yeah.
Oh.
All around Seattle, man. It's I told you I've got this bike now, and it's weird because I've actually seen such increase in my time now. We've talked about, before, I guess it was last week, where my legs are just so much stronger now tackling these hills with the bike and going for that distance, that when I do go running, even when I do 4 or 5 miles, it feels like I'm just coasting. It's really kind of easy effort, which is great. And my time's been pretty steady, around 7:05 on those mile times. So, I haven't really gotten out yet. My fiance and I just made the decision, unfortunately, that we're going to stick around Seattle for the holidays and not go see my folks in Nashville, which is a bummer. But I think having that time now, I'll probably run a lot more around here, on some of those days off. So, yeah, man, just trying to kind of balance everything. Like we said, we created last week, this CrossFit thing. It's working for us.
It's going to take off. Or my other suggestion I was going to say is if you keep putting in that many miles and I end up in traction, we bike this and we just talk to bikers.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
kind of flip it.
Tell me about your bike today. A 5-minute podcast episode. I went down here. Great talking to you, man. We'll talk to you next week.
Ignore my co-host. He can't move his arms or legs.
Yeah, exactly.
He got hurt looking at a tree.
Yeah, a tree filled with Christmas lights.
Yeah.
So yeah. But,
Well, speaking of being in uncomfortable pain, our that's a weird segue, but our guest today is Cory McGee. She's a part of Team USA, and she also is a migraine sufferer. And one of the things we talk about is, not only her transition, how she started out running as a really young kid. She ran in Cairo. She ran all throughout high school, college, and then through her entire life, she's not only been training, but living with these intense migraines. And it was really like kind of, you kind of put yourself in that situation. Like, what would I do if I just couldn't, feel my head for 8 hours a day, especially when you have to like go and run and be competitive.
Yeah, it was really interesting to hear what she described as a kid and growing up with the chronic migraines that she got, but then also how she's kind of recommitted to helping other people who also have the same experiences, and how candid she was about how difficult some of these stories were to talk about. And she didn't think it was going to be like that, to have to open up and talk about these experiences. But really interesting to just hear her story and see how much of a badass she is, and how she's winning, varsity races when she was in 7th grade, and running over in Greece and Egypt. I mean, she's kind of done it all and seen it all. And, it was awesome to kind of just talk to her and hear that story.
Yeah, it really was. So let's put on our running sneakers. Was that what we do before we listen to a podcast? I guess. I hope.
Yeah.
I imagine some people listen to us before they run or as they run.
I think my buddy, a shout out to him. I'll just call him out, Weston. I know you're definitely listening. I know he says that he listens to us when he runs. So, he puts on his running sneakers.
Yeah. Well, Weston and everyone else listening, this is for you. This is Cory McGee. What's up, everybody? We're back. It's Chris and Nick, and we are here today with Cory McGee. Cory, how are you?
I'm great. Excited to talk to you guys.
Are you?
Yeah. Not really sure what you're going to ask, but here we are.
I'm never excited to talk to me, and I talk to me a lot during the day.
That's
funny.
Nick, are you excited to talk to me?
Not so much you. I'm after seeing and reading up about Cory. Like, her story is crazy, and I think you went to Florida, right, Cory?
I did. Yeah.
So I went to Kentucky, and you and I already are having bad blood, I guess. We're SEC rivals. So
if I had known, I probably would have worn a different shirt.
I know, right?
I would have had some Gator colors on. Right? Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to talk to you. Your story's super interesting, and a lot of your past obviously has been very successful in running as a high schooler up through college, where you probably dominated my Kentucky Wildcats, all the way up to Olympic trials. And so, you started running kind of at an early age and saw a hell of a lot of success during that. I think you were like a 22-time Mississippi State high school champ. So can you name every single one of your records and your championships?
We're gonna time
Probably,
you. Go.
I could just summarize and say that I won most of my races in high school. But yeah, Mississippi is also odd in the sense of I didn't ever run JV. I ran varsity since 7th grade. And so I think sometimes the 22 is a little misleading because I didn't do all of that in 4 years. It took a little longer.
At what point?
Well, because you were so good, so you had more opportunities, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. Also, being one of the only distance runners in the state of Mississippi gave me a slight advantage. So,
at what age did you realize, okay, I'm a way better runner than everybody?
I would say that was probably, it was like simultaneous with realizing I was much worse than everyone at some other sports. So I played soccer competitively for years, and my dreams were to be an Olympian in soccer. And in, I would say, my freshman year of high school, I started to see everyone like continue to develop skill, and I was just very good at running in circles around everyone on the field. And so my coach really was sort of the one that said like, hey, you're probably going to get hurt out here, and you're also just, you need to focus on track. And at that point I had competed at like national championships in track and had won the mile at like the indoor national championship. So really it just revealed itself through me not continuing to improve in other sports, but my running kept getting better. So I was probably about 13 or 14 when that was pretty clear.
Did you find that I've been on a lot of teams where there's always that one person who they're just on the team because they're fast? Like I played baseball and there was the fast guy. Did like coaches try to recruit you to play other sports just because you were the fast one?
I think that was probably the case, but I didn't really explore a lot of other sports. Soccer was like my pride and joy. So that was really where that, I think that sort of was the reason going until I was about 13 or 14, but that's where skill starts to come in. And so, yes, I was that person. I was the one who, when we were assigned suicides, I was like secretly like, yes, because that was like my moment to shine. So yeah, I don't know. I think it probably annoyed some of my teammates, but it's funny to look back on because I'm still friends with a lot of my soccer girls and we laugh about it now. But I was definitely that person you're describing.
How, like, you know, I'm a former soccer player too. And so that's actually where my love of running came from, because I thought, hell, I can run 8 to 9 miles throughout a game, you know, gradually in high school and going into college. I can probably run 4 or 5 miles on a treadmill outside and kind of get into it. And here we are. So talk about how one, soccer shaped your love for running, and two, the differences in like training, especially at like 13 years old. Like, did you even know what the hell you were doing?
Well, some of the main differences, like I actually saw a dip in performance as a track athlete when I stopped playing soccer because I was getting so much out of those practices and games. So like what you're describing, I would be out there running around, you know, for 90 minutes. And then when I stopped playing, some of that agility and that explosiveness, I had to figure out how to do that in practice apart from being a soccer player. So there was definitely certain things that like I could see in training, and my dad was pretty good at identifying that. I think just like we realized when I stopped playing soccer that there were some weaknesses that showed up. But I mean, it's just so different to go from a team sport like that where the highs are so high when you win. It's so exciting to be there with so many friends, to now you're a distance runner and you're training by yourself most of the time, and winning races is obviously super exciting. But it's a different kind of fun, and it was really hard to let that go. So it's weird to reflect on because I don't think about it that often, but it's just a different love for the sport. I think, yeah, I look back on my soccer days and those were some of the most fun times in sports for me, but track has like a completely different feeling of like accomplishment when you win, because it's generally just all of your hard work. So it's a different kind of fulfilling.
Are other people in your family also good runners? Like, is it a hereditary thing? How did you? I've just always wondered that, because there's some people
it is sort of, yeah.
Okay.
It's funny you ask. So neither of my parents were runners.
Okay.
My parents were both competitive athletes. Actually, my mom was California state champ in trap shooting, and my dad was a football player. But my grandpa was a state champion in track in Mississippi, but in sprints. Mm-hmm. But I have 3 sisters, and I think because my dad didn't have any sons and he was very much like into football, track was a sport that he could kind of like get behind. And so he sort of introduced us to running. And I think that my parents probably were a little surprised by how the 4 of us like took to it. All 4 of us were pretty good. All 4 of us ran in college. And I would say I'm the one who was like the most in love with it, but all 3 of my sisters like had the genetic potential to be very good runners. So my parents weren't runners, but somehow we turned into a running family.
Nice. And your parents still run now, or your sisters still run now?
One of my sisters just graduated from Southern Miss, and she ran all 4 years there, and she still runs for fun, but they mostly ran through college, and like it's sort of one of those things when I go home, they'll go out for a run with me, but it's not as much of a focal point as it was for so many years. Like through high school, we were always on the 4x4 together, or like there was always two McGees like in every distance race. And so it's not quite as, it's not like we're the family that goes out for turkey trots actually, but we definitely like, it's still like, it's something that we'll encourage our kids to do. And now it is part of like our family for sure.
Do you guys, you have to compete still, right? Like there's still that, you're already
Yeah.
with your sisters, but like y'all gotta talk.
I have
like,
a lot of stories, right? Trust me.
Let's hear one. Let's hear one.
So it's actually like quite picturesque when I look back on it, but where I grew up, I'm from a small town, and across the street from my house is the church that I grew up going to. And we would, walk to church on Sunday, like right across the street. And then it just became like a tradition. We raced home every single Sunday. And it wasn't like just run across the street. It was like hop the fence, get through the gate, slam it in each other's face, like get on the porch, run up the stairs. Like it was like a whole thing. And so even now we're like all in our 20s, and when I go home for like a holiday or something, it's like we'll all kind of like size each other up, and like you can tell that we're adults now, but it's still within us, and like sometimes definitely break out into a race. So yeah, it's still very competitive.
Let's ask this. You said you're the sister with you have the most love for running, but are you the best runner?
I'm not the best athlete.
Okay.
No.
Which sister? Where do you fall in line? Where do you fall in line first?
I'm second. So my older sister could do any sport.
Okay.
She could, she takes to any sport. She was captain of like 3 or 4 teams in high school, and she's also equally fast. And then my sister Devin played soccer in college and then decided to switch to track halfway through. And she, I would say, is the most coordinated and just like the best athlete. And then my youngest sister, she's probably the same as me, but she just like, again, like it just takes a certain, it's, there's a lot of pain and a lot of dedication. And she was also a better student. So I think she just realized that was easier. But yeah, Devin is definitely the superior athlete, I would say.
So, I mean, what are the McGee family eating? I mean, like my fiance and I are talking about like kids in like the next year. Like I need to know what the hell to give my future kids so that they all go to college to play soccer, run, or like become badass athletes. Like, what's your secret?
I mean, I think that it was mostly just my parents were pretty good at like instilling that sports were sort of, I think, being one of 4 girls, and you hear so much about like girls like not having confidence like when they're competing against boys, and like growing up, they're told like, if you have a brother and a sister, perhaps like the boy gets a little bit more attention in the athletics or something. And we didn't have that issue, and we had a dad who was like sort of a manly man. And so I feel like with that, he just made us think there was no barriers. Like there's absolutely no reason that we couldn't be boys. And so we were just like the kids on the playground that like try to be the fastest in our grade instead of like the fastest girl. So, I mean, I think it was more, we ate a lot of pasta and like, we ate a lot of food, but I feel like my mom was always like feeding an army. But at the same time, it was more just like our approach to things. Like we just were super confident girls, which I think that was more just like because we didn't have a brother that we were like nervous should be stronger or faster than us. We just were like, we're gonna beat all the boys at school. And I'm really grateful for that because I never was like afraid to like try to be faster than boys.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was going to ask, like when I was a kid, it was a big deal to be like the fastest person on the playground. So you were like blowing the doors off like boys. Did you get challenged all the time to races?
All the time. Aaron Dito. He was like my
still name dropping.
Yeah.
Oh.
We would like look over and be like, ready? Like we're gonna race. And he was by far the fastest boy at my school. and we were friends, but it was almost like like it was like an honor to like race him, because he just had the reputation of like the fast boy. But I would like, I mean, he was my main competition for like the first 8 years of school.
And would people watch? Would people like gather around and watch you guys race?
Oh yeah, it was a big thing.
Like it's field days. It's like, oh no, man, Cory and Aaron are racing like main event. Let's do it.
Eat your lunch. We got to get to the playground.
Exactly. It's happening right now.
It really was. It was, yeah, it was always an exciting face-off between the two of us. Honestly, he did beat me pretty often, but as we got older, I was training, so then I started to beat him.
Was he taller?
And I guess that was almost, it was like, in the end, I won, I guess. I still see him. Still see him around when I'm home. He'll drive by and like we have a little wave or whatever. But it's just so funny to think that was like the first person I ever really raced, besides like my sisters or something.
Now you race his truck as he drives by.
Exactly.
I was just gonna say,
he's very supportive.
Inside the car and be like,
hey. It's like, damn it, she got the best of me on my legs, and now she's getting the best of me in my car. Fuck.
That's funny. Yeah, I love it. I think also just being from a small town, it's like easy to remember the people who had a little hand in like how you got to where you are with it all. I mean, he was in my class all the way through my senior year. So yeah, it's fun to reflect on.
So speaking of, you grew up in a small town, but I read on your bio that for a little while your family moved to Greece. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, how'd that happen?
So I talk about my dad a lot, but my dad he's retired now from the FBI. And when I was in middle school, he was working in, he did security for large venues and mass gatherings. And so 2004 was one of his biggest, I guess, projects throughout his career with FBI. And he was essentially in charge of security for the Olympic Games. So we lived in Northern Virginia when I was young, and then we lived in Mississippi for a few years, and then we made the move to Greece, which was just completely the purpose of it was for the Olympics, and then we were going to move back stateside. And so, yeah, we were there for about a year and a half, and my dad was just setting up security and making sure that the athletes and everyone who attended the games was safe. Which it's cool to see like behind the curtain. Cause now when I'm at big races and stuff, I can like think back to everything else that goes into it that we as athletes don't really think or know about very often.
Is that, so obviously the Olympics coming up and hopefully, knock on wood, did that experience, just kind of being around it, did it kind of motivate you even more? Were you still, and it's 2004, so you were probably still young where it may not have necessarily really hit you, but do you take that now and think, man, what is that experience going to be like compared to yours when you go as an athlete?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think about it all the time. And just from like being at world championships and making teams, I have not made an Olympic team, but to be like on Team USA throughout my career, for sure, it's always like a full circle moment. Like I take this sort of like, I'll have this out of body experience and remember being a kid and like going with my dad to a couple of different events where I met runners that were representing the United States and like being starstruck, but also having, sort of realizing that they're people and thinking like, I kind of like would want to try to do this. And so it's cool now because as a professional runner, I meet high schoolers or middle schoolers, and I always remind myself like that could be the kid who like I was. And sometimes you do meet a kid and you realize like they have what it takes. Like they're confident and like they like just, I don't know. It's really special to have that perspective, to remember like being 12 and meeting like the 1500 runner for the United States. And like, that could be me. And I try to not bring it up too often, but like I'll cross paths with people I met when I was 12 years old, like in Athens. And I don't want to be like, hi, like I met you when I was 12 and now we're at the same meet and we've raced against each other. But there are moments like that where I'm like, I remember when I met her and I was a kid. And yeah, so it's definitely like it's a really cool storyline, but it also just shows how like 12 years old versus 20 years old, like there aren't that many years between there. Like you could be meeting like a competitor who's still in middle school, and I don't know, like I might race that girl in 6-8 years from now. And like you forget, like the window of your athletic prime is so small, so it's interesting how that overlaps.
I think you need to start scouting out playgrounds and seeing who's racing, and then you'll figure it out.
I hate, like, it's funny. I have moments where I'll see a runner, like a kid, and I'll be like, oh, like, I don't know if I should go tell their parents, but I'm like, I don't want to be creepy, but like, you have really good running form.
I think you could probably get away with it. You should just carry your credentials with you, like a Team USA, like little. Like, I'm sure your dad has one of those flip wallets that you have to show his, like, badge. You should just put, like, a Team USA badge in there. Be like, I'm a runner, and your kid is a great runner. And just kind of, like, just flash some gold or something.
I probably should. I'm going to have to write that down after this so I don't forget. That's a great idea.
But I'm glad I could help. I also saw in your bio that you ran your first cross-country race in Cairo.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
I did. It was sort of all tied in with what we were talking about. So it's such a different system to obviously like being in the US where you might have like your state championship and then you race against like people in your region and then eventually have like a national championship or something. In where like the school I went to was the American School of Athens. And so it was probably still like 65% Greek students, but all English speaking, and you don't face off against schools that are just within Athens. Instead, you go to these meets that are all of the other American schools in your region. So my first cross-country race was in Cairo, and we had 2 races over the course of 3 days. And one was in the desert and one was along the Delta, so like near the Nile. And it was against schools from all over, like sort of the Middle East and Mediterranean. So it was like, I mean, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, like every country you can think of like in that region. And that was my first race, which was obviously very unusual. And I remember I was super, super competitive. So there was a girl, I was leading and there was a girl behind me who was getting pretty close, and I started to like flick my feet to kick sand tire, which is so awful.
No, you gotta do anything you can. Back and claw, I love it.
12-year-old me was like just relentless, and I would do anything. So I laugh now because I'm a much better sport, but at the time it seemed like, a good tactic. But yeah, it was like through the desert. They just had cones set up. Like you could just look out over this desert and there's just, a lap of cones, and we just went from cone to cone, and I was kicking sand, and that was my first cross-country race.
Let's talk about that for a sec. Nick, you go first, and then I have a question.
Well, I'm just like visualizing this right now, and I'm like, I don't even know where to start, but how did you finish, first of all? Did you end up winning the race?
I won, yeah.
Nice.
I think that's when my dad was sort of like, okay, we got to figure out like what's next, because I don't know. I think I would run with him, and I would go to practice with my team, and I would always try to run with the boys who were seniors, and I was in 6th grade. And so that was sort of the beginning of it. And we're in, we're in Greece, the Olympics are happening. Like you can't help it. I feel like as a parent, they saw me and they, in the midst of everything else going on, whether it was subconscious or whatever, my dad was like, she's a very good runner. Like we need to try to find more races.
So talk about that. That's actually really interesting to me is, Chris has kids. I don't, but I'm uber competitive. I've always joked, like my family and friends say Kobe gene, right? Like I have this chip on my shoulder I can create to make like myself super competitive to win. But as a parent, when your dad said like we should do something about this, was he more encouraging? Did he push it on you? Did he like communicate with you like, hey, is this something you're interested in? How does that conversation go so that you're like, yeah, I want to do this enjoyable, but I'm also like really passionate and want to be good at this?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a combination. There was, like any preteen, teenage girl, there were days where I was just like, leave me alone, Dad. Like, I didn't want him to make me go for a run. And I would like throw a little fit. But then the moment that I saw him like going by himself, I think it was more just like the fact that he and I had cultivated like a good relationship. Like, I enjoy being around my dad, especially as a kid. It was more that I just like couldn't stand the sight of him like going out for his run by himself. So I was like, okay, I'll go. Like, those were the days where I kind of didn't want to, but did it for him. But then like as I saw success, of course, it was more fun. Like I think a lot of kids, like if they're winning at something, they're going to want to do it. So, but my parents were super supportive. They did a really good job of like not making it feel like a punishment or stressful or anything. It was more just, I think the fact that we thought of it as like what my dad would say, family bonding. So like we would all like shudder at the sound of that, but like deep down, it was just like we knew that it was important. And so my dad sort of like used it as like an opportunity for us to spend time together, which I think motivated me to like be consistent. And then of course he was in better shape than me. Like, he was an adult man. And so it was like harder. So it's like getting in shape as well. Yeah, I think, but I didn't ever feel like I had to do it, but I almost felt like in a way guilt, I guess, like guilt was a good motivator. But then as I got older and, was doing well, like I started to love it. So it wasn't hard for me to get out the door. But definitely between the ages of like 12 and 14, there were a lot of times when my dad was like, okay, I'm going now. And I was like, okay, wait, let me grab my shoes. Like, there were a lot of those days.
So you had a lot of success early on, and you seem to remember a lot of it. Do you remember your like first really bad loss?
Yeah, I remember one really bad race in high school that was within the state of Mississippi, and it felt like I never felt like it was. I still got nervous for every race within my state. Like, even though I had been consistent in winning, there was still always like, this is a race and I have to take it seriously. But there was one cross country race where I actually dropped out at like a mile in or something, and that was a bad car ride home. I just, I can remember it clearly. I still get like clammy when I think about it.
Well, why did you?
Why did I lose, or why did I stop?
Why did you stop?
I think I had like put a lot of pressure on myself. It was maybe like an anxiety, actually. I think because I had gotten in my head that like I should win, or like I'm supposed to win, or people expect me to. And there was a girl who was from Southern Louisiana, like right outside of New Orleans, and she was a good runner, and she came over, and I had like beaten her, but she also was like generally pretty close to me in races. And I think I just psyched myself out big time. And then when she passed me, and then I saw my coach, and I was like, I quit. It was bad.
Because what you just described, like a lot of athletes go through that and then they never go back.
Oh yeah, it was tough. I think I lost some of my love for cross country from that experience. But also, it's interesting how like there's always the no excuses mindset. And like, I think sometimes it's good to have excuses in your own head, because if you give yourself like that sort of, if I say like, oh, I had anxiety and shortness of breath, and that's why I couldn't breathe during the race, and that's why she beat me, and that's why I quit. That's not a bad excuse to keep to yourself. Like, if you are saying that out loud to everyone around you, I think that that's like kind of obnoxious and not great as an athlete. But to give yourself an out in your head to know I'm better than that, I don't think is always a bad thing. And so that's why I could come back and be like, that wasn't me. That was just a fluke, and like get back to the starting line. So it's almost like I had to give myself an excuse for like why that didn't essentially like make sense. That's how I see
So
it. That's how
you
I
kind
chalk
of,
up a lot of bad races.
yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned something we've talked a lot about with previous guests too, about losing that love for the sport. And, you obviously refound it. And did it just last, for a short period of time? Did it carry on where even in the next race after that one that you mentioned just now, where even if you were being successful, you were still like, man, I really gotta like dig deep to make sure that I like am passionate and I love what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, I would say the feelings for like cross country were pretty affected by some of that stuff. But I don't know, maybe like in a way it worked out for me because I focused more on shorter events and I mean, that is where my heart is now. And so, yeah, I wonder if it's interesting to talk about. I've never really thought about it, but I'm sure that some of those losses led me to like sort of I do say like I don't like cross country as much as track, and I'm sure it comes back to some of those days. So yeah, it's like a therapy session. So thanks.
Exactly, right?
I didn't realize that reality.
Yeah, you had no idea that's what you were doing today, but Chris and I
I
are,
didn't.
internet therapists, so we
Yes.
got it out of you.
I've been practicing
Yeah.
online therapy for the last 10 years, so I can diagnose pretty much anything.
Yeah.
One thing that I can't diagnose, and it's something that you suffer from now, and well, before I set it up like that, you suffer from migraines, and you got
Yeah.
them at a young age. Like, when was the first time you knew, okay, this is something serious?
Oh, I was an infant when they were like I was diagnosed as a small child.
How do they know that?
I mean, I think because I was an incredibly difficult baby, there was some degree of they knew that, and like I would like projectile vomit, all of the what am I looking for? Like I had
Symptoms,
all
I
of
guess.
the symptoms of
Symptoms.
migraine as like a small child. And I was probably like a toddler at the time when I would like constantly complain about headaches and everything like that. So yeah, I was pretty young. I don't even really remember, truthfully.
And
Yeah.
when did you start getting treatment for that? I mean, like, what did they do for you as a kid?
So it wasn't until I was in high school that I was medicated, which I should have probably been when I was younger, but when I was really young, my mom had severe migraines as well and still does. And so she just did a lot of like the different things that she would do in order to like alleviate her migraine pain. And I would sort of practice similar things. So truthfully, throughout my entire childhood, I just nearly every night was upset about headaches. And I would just like sit beside the couch and like one of my parents, either my mom or dad, would like rub the back of my head and rub my neck and everything just for like relief at night. And then, yeah, there was just a variety of different things that I did. I spent hours in the bathtub weekly because I had like headaches and would just lay there and like not feel well. And my mom would turn the lights off. And that was just like another way to sort of combat some of it. But I mean, I was a super active, like normal child and like was outside most of the time, was always like, playing with friends, but it was always like, I had chronic migraine like throughout all of my childhood. I can think about like being on the school bus and like complaining about my head hurting on the way to and from school and like asking my friends to like press on my head, and like I would like just have headaches constantly. So yeah, I don't know. It was a big part of growing up. I just thought that everyone had it though, which is also kind of weird.
And now is it like alleviated itself? Are you still experiencing as many migraines, headaches? Kind of, when did it disappear? Like, where is it at right now?
Yeah, so through high school, it was still pretty severe. I was like thinking about it a lot recently because when I was in high school, I would walk out of school every day and go, like, because transitioning from the fluorescent light to regular lighting was like someone stabbing my eyeballs. Like it was so painful every day. but it was because I was like just used to the pain of being inside in artificial lighting. And then once I would walk out into natural light, it would almost like be too much to bear. So that's the worst of it. And then once I no longer was in schools and like in buildings throughout the day, and now the way that my life is, like, of course my job is running, and so I'm not sitting in an office. I think that like that difference has honestly been like the reason why I don't have the same pain that I used to. I now just have to be really cautious of like what's in my home. Like I'm very careful with scents, and like everything I use is like hypoallergenic, and nothing's like artificial scents because that triggers me big time. So yeah, I think I learn a lot from my mom too, because she's just like better at recognizing the things that like cause problems, and she's been dealing with it for, 30 years longer than I have. So I'm like, hey mom, I don't feel well, like have a headache coming on, like I don't know. And she's like, well, what's different? I'm like, well, I bought 2 candles and some eucalyptus. She's like, get it out of the house. And it's like, okay, I'm fine now. It's just stuff like that I wouldn't really realize on my own. And also I just have to be careful with like the lights in where I live. And yeah, it's funny. Like it feels like they're silly details, but truthfully, like they determine if I'm like in pain or not. So, yeah, just small things that I have to like try to identify.
How does that affect your running and training?
It's interesting. I think I'm pretty good at dealing with pain, and I don't know if it's because of like my history with migraines or what, but I can generally train through whatever I have going on, whether it be like an injury brought on by running or a migraine or something. Like I think running's almost like, oftentimes when I don't feel well, if I go for my run, it almost makes me feel better afterwards. So usually, even if I don't feel good, like when I start, I can pretty much know that I'll feel better after. So I think that running like helps the whole thing, truthfully. Which, yeah, I mean, I think it's been really helpful for me in that way. And I think probably part of why I don't have as severe of migraines as I probably would otherwise. Also because I have to be like on top of my health in order to do my job. And so I think that I'm also just better about like everyday details because I want to obviously be able to perform. And that probably just having a healthier lifestyle, I'm sure, is somehow counteracting some of that.
So I'm obviously on as a running podcast, we talk a lot about health and your routine, but considering that that's pretty much what you're paid to do, right? Like your routine is going to be so different, and your nutrition is going to be so different than what Chris and I and any of our listeners do. I kind of want to know the flip side. Like when you're not running, what are you doing? Like, are you hanging out? Are you splurging on food? You're in Boulder, so you go on hikes. Like, what are you doing in your free time when you're not competing?
Yeah, so I've been in Boulder for 2 years now, and I feel like I have to explain this because it wasn't until I lived here that all of the things surrounding my running maybe weren't exactly what I should have been doing. So before I moved here, I was in Boston for 4 years, and I was constantly busy. I was either like out walking around the city or like checking out the art museums or, going to a cool cafe. And it was because like I ran my mileage for the day and I did a good workout this morning. And so now I can kind of just like relax. And now I'm on a different team where it's just the expectations are so much more, I guess, easier for me to sort of see. And the girls who I train with, I can like look to them for what I'm supposed to do surrounding training. And the answer is I do a whole lot of nothing. I train really hard, and I spend most of the time when I'm not running cooking, making good meals, resting, napping. I never had like a Netflix subscription or any of that. And when I moved here, I now have every single thing on my TV that you can think of. And I watch so many shows. because
Lifetime
most of the
Christmas
day.
movies this time of year for sure.
What's that?
Lifetime Christmas movies this time of year.
Yeah. I mean, just all day long, I go for my run. I come back, I prepare food, and I pretty much put my feet up, maybe take a nap, and then I go for my second run. And that's pretty much my days.
Wait,
I mean, I think it.
real quick,
What's that?
break down the two runs for us. Like, what's the morning run and what's the afternoon run?
Yeah, morning is usually the harder effort. So if we have anything from a track workout to a long run to tempo or something like that, and those practices on our like more focused effort days, which are 3 days a week, those probably start at 9 a.m. and then go until 1 because we lift afterwards. So those are my tough days. Like one thing about my team now is like our hard days are very hard and our easy days are very easy. So like our tough workout days, we also are in the gym. Where some people train where they do like a hard run and then they lift a different day, but that's not what we do. And then our easy days, I can run anywhere between like 6 and 8 miles in the morning and then maybe have a double of 3 or 4 miles. And then I'll have like one down day a week. That's just one morning run. That's probably like a 6 or 8 mile run. And then workout days, I also run a second time. So the mileage on those days is usually anywhere between like 12 and 15 miles. And then my easier days are closer to like 8 to 10. It just depends. In a nutshell.
I always wondered, like, I just dawned on me, like, do you guys use running apps? Like, do you have an app that has, like, you did 7,000 miles this week? Like, I just thought about it, like, I'm sitting there, like, literally just yesterday, I ran, like, an extra point, like, 0.1 of a mile just to get over 800. And it just dawned on me, like, you're on 800, like, in a month. And I'm like, what are you using? Is it a watch? Do you use a running app? What do you do?
Yeah, so I wear a Garmin and it tracks all of my mileage. However, I don't share it because my coach writes all of my training and like it's essentially I mean, I'm doing the work, but it's like his brainchild, you know, like the things that he writes for each of us.
Oh, I got you. So you don't want to leak that to people.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because I do like to talk about workouts and training, but there's just sort of this thing in running culture these days at the pro level where it's obviously like monetized. Like a lot of people sell training plans. And so my coach, Joe, like he could sell training plans. He doesn't, but he coaches like an elite group of people. And it's just not for me to share at this point. So I'm sure the day will come where maybe he, you know, does let that out, but it's like no one's reinventing the wheel. We just run a lot. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like I don't want to be like, hey everyone, I did 2400s in this pace today, and then like whoever I race against is like comparing their workout to ours or whatever.
Right. So
it's like a weird running culture thing. I don't know why.
there's like a little bit of like espionage going on in running, like people trying to take other people's running plans and stuff. I kind of like it.
Some people are more paranoid than others. Like they think that you're copying them, but yeah, I don't really know what that's all about. Like it's just all so vague. Because I mean, truthfully, a lot of my workouts, like I always race better than I train. And so it would almost be misleading if I was like, yeah, everyone, I couldn't do that workout today. And then I'd show up to the race and everyone would think like, you're not going to run well.
You should give fake Garmin stats like on your socials. Be like, oh, I did this mile, and you just like totally throw everybody off, and then they're following whatever you're doing. But it's
I ran 6 miles this week.
Yeah. I ran 6 miles with a donut in my hand. It's been the greatest thing ever.
Is that how you used to do Aaron in middle school? You'd be like, oh, my ankle, it's sore, and he'd go really easy, and then you'd last 100 meters just blow past him and be laughing the whole time with your chocolate milk in hand.
Yeah, if I really thought long and hard about it, I'm sure there were some instances similar to that. As embarrassing as it is to admit. Yeah.
So I know you're not. I mean, you're far from ending your professional career as a pro athlete. But have you thought about, you know, what might come next? I mean, you said it. The life cycle as a peak athlete is so small, and so do you want to stay in running? I mean, it's such a cool community, and you've been around it basically your whole life. What comes next for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I think more and more about it, of course, like as the years, as I continue on this path. But at this point, I feel like there's a lot of question marks in what's next for me. I love being in Boulder, but I know that this is like specific to my running. And I probably will make my way back to the East Coast in the next however many years. My family's in Mississippi, but my boyfriend's in Boston, so there's a good chance I'll end up there. Which I love the running community in Boston. It's like such a special part about the city, like the fact that running is just so intertwined with the marathon, and there's so many different like running clubs. So I can see myself there, and New Balance is there. So that's who sponsored me my entire pro career. And I love New Balance as well, and the people who work there. So I'm not sure if I see myself like necessarily working in the sport, because I think that I've dedicated so much of myself to it that I'm not sure if like I'd even be able to handle the other side of it. But I don't know. It's hard to say. If I end up back in Boston, there's a good chance that I'll be involved with something running related. I wonder about it, but I really have no clear idea of exactly what that looks like.
You've got time. You shouldn't.
Yeah.
You shouldn't. There's no question to answer. You're right in the middle of like your peak athletic ability. Like you shouldn't be thinking too hard about it. But I was really interested because you've been around it for so long.
Yeah. I mean, I will say if I continued on the trajectory I was on like 2 years ago, I probably would have a better answer. But the fact that since I moved out here, I've had some improvements, I'm like, okay, I can let myself sort of just lean into this a little longer. But yeah, I would like to know. It would be good to be able to answer that question.
I'd like to know what my life's going to look like in 4 years too. Trust me.
Yeah.
We'll probably still be doing this.
Exactly.
I hope so. I mean, that'd be great. I wanted to go back to something you touched on briefly when you were talking about your first competitive race in Cairo. So Nick and I once did this show about the unwritten rules of running, just like casual running, the weekend warrior type running. And it was just like the unwritten rules that you should and shouldn't do. Now, you said when you're running in Cairo, you kind of like kicked up sand or kicked up gravel. Okay, so in competitive running, what are some of the unwritten rules that in competitive running you shouldn't do, like either in warming up or in the actual race? Like what are some things that are just considered no-nos?
Well, just in general, like training, there's a lot of dislike for people who like essentially one step, like they run like one step ahead of you when you're on a training run together. So there's a lot of like, oh man, like that person like is such a like two-stepper or whatever. Like they'll just run just ahead of you and you're trying to run together and talk, but they're like putting one step on you the whole time. And so you're like not running side by side.
Okay.
And you see that a lot in people who maybe train by themselves usually and then start training with a group. And I've been guilty of it, but I try to like be self-aware. I'm like, oh, don't two-step, like this girl really doesn't like that. So that's a huge no-no, which is just something that like most people have no idea about. Like that just sounds so bizarre because it's like you're just out for a run together, but there's such a, I don't know, like as people who run a lot, like they just have like, there's obviously certain terminology and everything surrounding it. So it's like a very real thing. So that's a no-no. Among my team, it's like it's totally a no-no to comment on like the obvious, like it's very cold today. Like, yeah, we know, like we're all here. Everybody's here. It's not just cold around you. So I think because we're already doing things that are like very difficult at, 8, 9 a.m. we're out at the track and like we can't use our hands because they're frozen and we can't tie our shoes on because our hands are frozen. And the wind is like, ripping against our face. And then someone's like, it's really cold today. Like that's just a huge no-no. Like don't do that because we know.
What about like,
so, yeah.
Is there any showboating things that you should never do? Like if you're obviously winning a race, like are there things like don't ever do this?
Yeah, I think that's more like a case by case thing, like if you care or not, like how you're like if like what you're trying to make your image or whatever. But I think because you've seen so often where someone does celebrate too soon and then they like get nipped at the line, it's like maybe we should all just agree not to celebrate when you're coming down the last 100 meters. I personally don't think I would ever do that, but
have you ever seen someone celebrate and get like caught?
I mean, I've watched races of it, but not in person.
Not in person.
Or at least, yeah, I can think of a few instances where people I really care about were either the person getting caught or catching or whatever. So that's always, yeah, it's awkward.
What would happen if someone on your team got caught? Like, what would happen if something on your team not got caught, like they lost because of that?
Yeah, I think, well, my coach is like a pretty low key guy. I think he would be very disappointed. I think he would be really upset. Like, I don't know if he could look at that person after the race. I feel like he would just be like, why did you do that? That was so dumb. Like I cringe to even imagine being in that situation.
Yeah, you look like you're slightly uncomfortable even thinking about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't. That would be terrible. Like I would not be able to look at Joe. I would be like, I'm so sorry. So yeah, that seems like a really bad idea. I would not do that. Unless like, unless you're the only person in the race or something, like you just know it's completely impossible for anyone to catch you. But even then it's like, what's the point? Just like wait till you cross the finish. So yeah, that's a huge one. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in terms of competition. I am probably not the best person to ask that because I'm like ultra competitive, and I feel like in race settings, I transform into like just a version of myself that is very competitive. And so I don't know, I'm not like the friendliest racer, truthfully. So I might not be the right person to ask.
How does Cory psych herself up for a race? Like what's the pregame?
Mostly I like to try to be as calm as I can because I get so amped. So I have to almost like try to subdue my, getting pumped up. I'm like, don't listen. Right? What's that?
Like reverse psychology, like your heart's beating super fast and you're really amped, but your mind has to like go down and it's like, whoa.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to be someone who would listen to music and try to get in the zone, as they say, and I realized it was like to my own detriment because I was going so hard the first like lap, or I would like kind of lose energy before the race even began, where now it's almost like I get confidence from being calm, like when I get there and I'm the one who's like the first to check in, or I'm the first to like be ready to walk out on the track, and I'm just easygoing, like say hi to the official, like that makes me pumped up because I'm like, I'm prepared and I'm not having to do anything to like fool myself into thinking I am. I just get like confidence from being like, okay, it's just, this is exactly what I've been training for, and like deep breaths. And that's like where I feel like I found that happy medium finally, which is great.
I always listen to classical music, and when I feel like people tell me I'm crazy. They're like, dude, you listen to the Forrest Gump like theme song for like 3 miles of your run? I'm like, yeah, because the first mile I ran like 30 seconds off my usual time, and I needed to come back down and use my other senses outside of just like my energy of like craziness to be like deep breaths, like soak it all in. So people think I'm crazy. I'm like, I'm a conductor going to play. I'm gonna like tell people keep the pace. So it's weird how people like adapt and do different things to get themselves mentally prepared while still being like internally psyched. So it's interesting to hear your answer there.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
So before we let you go, let's talk about your work with the Association of Migraine Disorders and Researchers Hope campaign. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was like such an interesting opportunity. I really never had ever thought about the fact that that was something that was important to discuss and like shed light on, because truthfully, I didn't realize how prevalent it was. And I didn't know, like, even when I began discussing it and like talking about it through social media, how much of a reaction I got, especially from women who are like in the sport as well. So it's been sort of like a surprising reaction for me, in the sense of, I just felt like I felt like I opened a conversation that I didn't know so many people like hadn't ever had a chance to talk about. And it was cool to discuss like the way that running has impacted it for me, and the way that I think that has like maybe made it something that's easier to live with. But I also just feel like it's a really important thing, like just through reading about like the funding that they have received versus some other like chronic diseases, or like the research that goes into it. I just didn't realize like that there was such a disparity. So I'm looking forward to discussing it more in order to like try to help raise some awareness about it. Because truthfully, it was like a very difficult thing for me to go through when I was younger. Looking back on it, probably harder than I knew in the moment. So it'd be great to like have any impact on trying to like get people to be able to figure out a better solution, or, you know, maybe even a cure.
That's totally awesome. You know, I think it's admirable to hear what you're saying, because you can relate on one sense, but then obviously using your platform to help other people is super cool. So kudos to you for, making it part of your routine outside of just running, to kind of talk about it. Because with anything, those type of things are tough for people to talk about. So good work all around.
Thank you. Yeah, it's also, I didn't know it was going to be difficult to talk about, but there were some times where I was like, well, I do remember once when I was on the school bus and I like needed my friend to like lean against my head because I was in so much pain. And I remember like, you know, a lot of times like my mom running a bath, and like that was, you know, an hour of my day was just like sitting there and trying to like feel better. And I was, 10 years old. Like that's stuff that I didn't realize was actually like challenging, because it was just, when you're a kid, things in your life, you just think that that's normal. And then one day you look back and you're like, oh, that was pretty unusual actually. Like you don't know when you're in the thick of it. And so, yeah, to start talking about it for the first time after like years, it isn't necessarily easy to discuss, especially because like I don't know, I don't have like an answer whenever someone asks me like, what have you done? It's like, I don't necessarily have like advice yet. So, it's not easy to talk about, which I was surprised by when I initially like entered into the conversation. So that was actually surprising to me. I didn't know that it would be difficult.
Well, it's
nice.
good.
Well, go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, where can we and other people listening find more about you and what you're doing with everything going on in your life?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, which is at Cory McGee Runs. And I'm on Twitter. I don't have TikTok or YouTube or anything, but
You're better
mostly
off.
Just on Instagram. Yeah. That's where I post my running stuff.
Less chances for people to steal your training secrets if you have too many social media platforms. All they need is to see on your TikTok how far you're running for 30 seconds. Is that how long they last? 30 seconds? I don't even know.
I don't even know.
I'm not sure.
We're all like, we don't even know about the most popular platform in the world.
Yeah.
Great. So we'll link out to all those in the article. And Cory, thanks. It was really great having you on, and we hope to have you on again soon.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to talk to you guys.
And that brings another episode of We Run This to a close. Nick and I want to thank everybody for listening. If you love the podcast, please share it with friends or leave a review on iTunes. And remember to follow Nick and I on social media. He's at It's Nick Domingo, and I'm at Chris Illuminati on Twitter. Or follow us both on Instagram at WeRunThis_pod. Until next time, see everybody out there.